Welcome to the chaos sector. What have we here? Another so-called mass shooting. I think most people are not falling for this anymore, but the political agenda behind it does have a societal impact. If you are unplugged in the matrix, you would know why these so-called mass shootings are happening, and especially this specific one. It's an attempt at influencing the 2024 presidential election. The Republicans could face a very difficult challenge regarding gun laws. Like mentioned before, if the so-called mass shootings continue to happen, then Republicans have to show the American people that they are willing to negotiate with Democrats on gun safety legislation. Yet, if they continue plastering AR-15s in their Twitter feeds, citizens would start to assume they do not care about the lives lost due to so-called mass shootings. It's inevitable, there will be a breaking point. But let's examine the news report on the latest so-called mass shooting.
Developing now, another community in the U.S. searching for answers after a deadly mass shooting.
In this one, taking the lives of 8 people, injuring nearly a dozen others. The gunfire happened Saturday at an outlet mall in Allen, Texas, just outside Dallas. This morning, we're learning more about the gunman police say was responsible. Our Ezzy Castro is following the latest updates. Federal investigators are involved in this now, Ezzy.
Well, according to law enforcement officials in Texas, agents are looking into the possibility the gunman may had white supremacist views after collecting evidence over the weekend.
Okay, the stage is set. White supremacist who so-called set out to massacre individuals at a shopping mall in Texas. Seems about right, after all, Texas is a so-called racist state, right? Texas also is a state that is quite lenient when it comes to firearms. So when you put those two together, what do you think will happen? A so-called white supremacist, in a state that doesn't seem too concerned about toughening their gun laws? A so-called mass shooting was eventually gonna pop up.
They say the suspect did not have a serious criminal record.
So they confirmed that he didn't have a serious criminal record, right? But the way it was described, he did have a criminal record, it just wasn't quote, serious. Let's break it down a bit. Texas is a state that doesn't require a background check for purchases of firearms. Oh, okay, quite shocked that there haven't been more so-called mass shootings in this state, right? Funny how the federal government gets involved after the so-called mass shootings, but the same federal government is not requiring all states to perform background checks. Why even intervene then? You had no concern prior, all of a sudden you investigate the so-called shooters after the fact? Come on. Let the state handle it, since you allow Texas to literally be the wild, wild west. You can't come in after the so-called massacre and investigate. What's the point in doing that? Lives have already been taken.
A memorial now growing near the scene where 8 people were killed and nearly a dozen others were injured after another mass shooting, this time in Allen, Texas. Investigators say the gunman, 33-year-old Mauricio Garcia.
And there it is, he was 33 years old. Just another low-level Freemason who sold out to the secret society long ago. Good job in selling out, buddy, they will only use you for their benefit. You on the other hand, will be the one exposed. But, that name sounds an awful like a Hispanic individual. Perhaps even more specific, a Mexican name. So we have a Mexican white supremacist? Oh my days, that's out of this world. A new racism has arrived.
Drove up to the Allen Premium Outlets on Saturday and began to shoot. The terrifying moment sent shoppers running for their lives.
It was a war zone there. There's no other way to describe it. There's no way these people could have survived the assault of those weapons.
Garcia was shot and killed by a police officer that was already at the mall on a different call.
He heard gunshots, went to the gunshots, engaged the suspect, and neutralized the suspect.
While authorities searched Garcia's parents' home over the weekend, law enforcement officials tell the Associated Press he allegedly made online posts that expressed interest in white supremacist and neo-Nazi views, though they are working to figure out a motive.
Oh, we have the motive, he's anti-Mexican. Bonkers, he's a Mexican, but wants to be a white supremacist, so he planned on so-called massacring a large population of Mexicans at the shopping mall to show his loyalty to neo-Nazis. Take that, and run fast for the hills, my friends, the rise of Mexican white supremacist is among us. And what about the Mexicans crossing the border at this very moment? What does this mean for the country if some of them are white supremacist? Uh-oh.
According to investigators, Garcia was armed with tactical gear and an AR-15 style rifle at the time of the shooting. Meantime, President...
Of course he was armed with the typical gun and the typical fatigues to match. Gotta get the image right, or else it won't look badass. Once again, this person is purchasing all of the crap that screams potential threat. Yet it just continues to happen. Individuals are purchasing AR-15s so much, it's like a common online purchase. Select the item, the color, even add tactical gear as suggested, click order now, go to checkout, pay for the items, and bingo, it will arrive in a few days. And you also have the option to have it delivered the same day, so he more than likely chose that option. My point here, the sales of AR-15s have increased since the so-called mass shootings started becoming common. But this increase in sales hasn't created new legislation to prevent the so-called mass shootings from occurring, they only tiptoe around the issue. Never mind the hoax, let's focus on the gun laws. The state of Texas is being used as a ploy to catapult the Democrats to a higher regard with the American voters. Also, to influence many Hispanics and Mexican Americans in Texas to vote Democrat this upcoming election. To be honest, they should. Within the matrix, of course. Since Republicans won't budge on gun law negotiations, then it causes a ripple effect in society, where more so-called mass shootings will happen. Remember, these individuals are apparently quote, normal, before so-called committing mass shootings. They are purchasing these weapons legally. Like mentioned, the federal government, especially federal agencies such as the FBI, only enforce what is made law within the federal government. The federal government itself is a collection of factions that make up the, well, federal government. Now, let's break it down a bit, so you can see how Republicans should be held accountable for so-called mass shootings. Once again, within the matrix.
The legislative branch is made up of the House and Senate, known collectively as the Congress. Among other powers, the legislative branch makes all laws, declares war, regulates interstate and foreign commerce, and controls taxing and spending policies. In this chart, we see how a bill becomes law. A draft is presented before Congress, in this case, a gun control draft of the bill. It then goes before a subcommittee. After that subcommittee discusses the draft, it is presented before the committee in a hearing. Now this is where all the nonsense unfolds, such as the hearings we have examined prior. You have the quote, prominent representatives of each party, blabbering, ranting, and voicing their disagreements before the speaker. The next step is reading of the bill before the floor, and of course the filibustering process. After this is all done, there is a vote on the bill, and it is presented before the Supreme Courts. Then if it passes, the President then signs the bill into law. And there you have it, that draft becomes a bill, then that bill becomes law. The current gun laws were voted on by both Democrat and Republican members in the House and Senate. Senate members represent each state, and House members represent districts. Yet, is it rocket science to draft a comprehensive gun law bill? Here are a list of questions that would end all of the nonsense. Should there be metal detectors in schools? Should there be security guards present at schools? Should each classroom be equipped with an emergency crate, consisting of pepper spray, bulletproof vest, and a non-lethal firearm, used for self-defense? The teacher is the only one who has access to the crate by passcode. Or, here's a better solution. Should there be a small police department facility on campus, preferably right in front of the campus? You know, that actually says, police on the building. Make all states comply with a universal background check, that includes all records of criminal and health reports. Make all merchants, who attempt to sell firearms, comply with a universal background check, that includes all records of criminal and health reports. Any attempt to purchase a semi-automatic rifle, requires screenings from the federal government, before any sale of this specific firearm is completed. Now I ask you, has any of this been done, since the so-called mass shootings became a major problem? Well, the evidence indicates, no it hasn't. But, why are reporters bringing great ideas to the table, instead of congressional numbskulls? Are we any more intelligent than these people? Maybe just a tad, but this still doesn't justify their lack of innovation, their assertion, and just flat-out compassion for the lives so-called lost in so-called mass shootings. You can't fix a problem if you don't address it directly. Each state does have its own statutes regarding federal laws, but when it comes to firearms, each state should comply with a federal law that applies to each and every state. But as mentioned prior, and will continue to be pointed out, the mudslingers will just keep at it, until they need a bath. In other words, they are filthy. Time to clean it up. This is the chaos sector.